"Am I worth saving?" the shaking gunslinger asked the Lakota woman. Dust swirled around the boots of a lone man as he trudged forward, each step heavier than the last. He was a gunslinger, once known across towns and trails for his quick hand and fearless spirit, but now his name was remembered only by those who had stories to tell of what he had done, stories that carried fear, anger, or pity. The man himself, though, no longer remembered the pride of those days. All that remained was weariness. Every movement hurt. Every memory stabbed at him sharper than any bullet ever could. He had been running for so long that he could not even remember from what. Perhaps from himself. Perhaps from the mistakes that weighed on his shoulders like a stone he could never put down. He walked along a dirt path that cut through a valley lined with jagged rocks, the kind that made it impossible to find shade, impossible to hide. Each step stirred up dust that coated his worn boots and the tattered coat he wore. His coat had once been black and clean, but now it was faded, patched in places, and smelled faintly of sweat and dust. His hat, tilted low over his eyes, hid most of his face, but not the trembling that shook his hands. The gunslinger's name was known to some, whispered in corners of saloons or behind closed doors of trading posts, but it brought him no comfort. He did not feel pride or fear when he heard it. He only felt the hollow ache of regret. He remembered faces from his past, friends, enemies, strangers he had shot too quickly or left behind, and he remembered the sound of their disappointment, the quiet horror in their eyes, and the ways he had failed people who had once trusted him. As he walked, his mind drifted to memories of towns he had passed through. He remembered the smell of smoke from chimneys, the laughter of children running through dusty streets, and the warm greetings he once received before fear replaced them. Those times felt like a different life, a life that was not his own anymore. Now, in the open plains and lonely valleys, he was invisible, a ghost carrying a body that was tired, bruised, and fragile. The land around him was silent, except for the occasional caw of a crow or the rustle of dry grass. The sun was relentless, burning his skin through his coat, leaving a sting that reminded him he was still alive. His throat was dry, his lips cracked. He had little water and no food to speak of. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, sharp and insistent. Yet, even as his body protested, he kept moving forward because stopping meant facing the emptiness inside him, and that was something he was not ready to do yet. By late afternoon, the path led him to the edge of a small river. The water was clear, sparkling in the sunlight, and for a moment he considered resting. He sank to his knees beside the bank and cupped his hands, drinking the cool water slowly. It tasted like life, and yet it also reminded him of what he had lost. As he drank, he noticed the reflection of his own face in the water. The man staring back was gaunt, with sunken eyes and pale skin stretched tight over his bones. His hair was unkempt, his beard grown long enough to scratch his cheeks, and his hands trembled slightly as he set the water down. He did not recognize the man he saw. That man had been a fighter, a survivor, someone who could face danger without fear. The man in the reflection was only a shadow, shaking and uncertain, barely able to hold himself upright. The gunslinger pressed his palms to the riverbank and leaned forward, letting the cool mud and stones ground him. His mind wandered to the battles he had fought, the people he had defended, and the enemies he had struck down. He remembered how each victory had once felt like proof that he belonged in this world, proof that he was strong and worthy. But now those victories seemed hollow, meaningless against the weight of the lives he had harmed, the lives he could not save, and the moments he had lost forever. Night began to fall, and the sky shifted from orange to deep purple, stars beginning to twinkle like tiny fires in the vast darkness. He knew he had to find shelter soon. The thought of sleeping on the cold, hard ground made his muscles ache even more, but there was no town in sight, no friendly door to knock on. He would have to make do with the wilderness, with nothing but the rocks, the trees, and the endless sky above. As he walked along the riverbank, he stumbled upon a small cluster of trees that offered a faint shelter from the chill of the coming night. He collapsed against one, his back to the rough bark, and closed his eyes. His body ached in every joint. He thought about the last place he had called home, though home was not the right word. It had been more a temporary stop, a town he had passed through while trying to outrun himself. He remembered the faces there too, some kind, some suspicious, some openly hostile. He remembered the conversations he had had with strangers, each one reminding him of the life he had once lived and the choices that had led him to this lonely riverbank. In the quiet of the night, the gunslinger felt something he had not felt in a long time: fear. Not the fear of being caught, not the fear of dying in a gunfight, but the fear of never finding peace, the fear of a life wasted. He shivered, though the night was warm, and pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders. He thought about the people he had hurt, the ones he had failed, and the endless chain of consequences that had followed him like a shadow. Could he ever make amends? Could he ever find a reason to live again? The questions tormented him, and for the first time he wondered if anyone, anywhere, could see past the mistakes and brokenness that defined him now. Sleep finally overtook him, but it was uneasy, filled with dreams of gunfire, of voices accusing him, of faces he could not forget. He awoke several times during the night, each time unsure where he was or who he had been. When the first light of dawn broke over the valley, painting the land in soft gold, he felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief. Another day had begun, and somehow he had survived the night. That small victory gave him a flicker of hope, though he did not dare to name it yet. As he rose, brushing dirt and leaves from his coat, he noticed faint signs of life nearby. The tracks of animals, the whisper of wind through the grass, and in the distance, the outline of a small encampment. It was far enough that he could not see who lived there, but close enough to wonder if it could offer him help, or at least a place to rest. He hesitated, knowing that his reputation as a gunslinger could either invite danger or relief. He had learned long ago that some people feared him, some wanted revenge, and some might offer kindness if they saw his suffering as genuine. With careful steps, he moved toward the encampment, keeping his eyes on the ground, his mind alert to any sound that might indicate danger. Each step was a negotiation between hope and fear, between the desire to find help and the dread of rejection. By mid-morning, he had reached the edge of the camp. There, he stopped and watched from a distance. The people in the camp moved with quiet purpose, tending fires, carrying water, and caring for children. They did not notice him yet. Their world seemed so different from his own, filled with simple tasks and unspoken wisdom that he had long forgotten. He felt a pang of envy. He had never known such peace. He had always been a man on the run, a man with a gun in hand and eyes scanning for threats. He had never learned the rhythm of quiet life, of steady hands and patient hearts. And yet, as he watched, something stirred in him, a fragile thought that perhaps this place, these people, could offer more than mere survival. Perhaps they could offer him a chance to be seen not as a gunslinger or a ghost, but as a human being, broken and trembling, but still alive. His hands shook as he stepped closer, unsure of how to begin. He knew he could not simply walk in and demand help. He had learned too well that fear and reputation often outweighed reason. He had to show that he was no threat, that he only sought what everyone sought: a chance to exist, to heal, to find meaning beyond the shadow of his past. And so, with a deep breath and a trembling step forward, the gunslinger moved into the light of the camp, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would see the man he was now, rather than the man he had once been. The gunslinger's eyes scanned the camp as he approached, uncertain if he would be welcomed or chased away. The people moved with calm precision, as if the land itself guided them. He noticed children playing near the edge of the clearing, their laughter soft but clear in the quiet morning air. A fire crackled in the center, smoke curling gently toward the sky. Everything felt so alive, so peaceful, so unlike the towns and trails he had traveled. He could almost forget for a moment the weight of his past, the fear that had followed him like a shadow. It was then that he saw her. A woman standing near the fire, her movements steady and purposeful. She carried a small bundle of herbs in her hands, and the smell of sage and sweet grass hung faintly around her. She was Lakota. He could tell from the way she held herself, the quiet strength in her posture, and the way her eyes seemed to take in the world without judgment. She looked at him, her gaze steady and calm, and for the first time in years, the gunslinger felt that someone was truly seeing him. Not the gunslinger who had been feared, not the man who had run from everyone, but the broken human beneath it all. The woman did not speak at first. She watched him from a distance, noting the way his hands trembled, the slump of his shoulders, and the weariness in his eyes. Most people would have been afraid of him, or at least suspicious. They might have whispered to each other, warning of the danger he could bring. But she did not. Instead, she felt a quiet pull, an understanding that he was not a threat, only a man who had been hurt and was searching for something he had long lost, perhaps himself. Finally, she stepped forward. Her voice was soft but carried easily through the morning air. "You are far from your path," she said. Her words were not accusing, only observing. The gunslinger started at the sound, unsure how to respond. He wanted to say he was lost, that he did not belong anywhere, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he simply nodded, his eyes avoiding hers, ashamed that he had to ask for help from someone he did not know. The woman did not press him. She moved closer, her steps quiet on the soft grass, and held out a small gourd filled with water. "Drink," she said. He hesitated, feeling the weight of pride and fear, but his thirst was stronger. Slowly, he took the gourd, his hands shaking as he lifted it to his lips. The water was cool and clean, carrying a taste of the earth and river. He drank deeply, each swallow easing some of the dryness in his throat and the tension in his chest. When he finished, he set the gourd down, and the woman nodded slightly, as if approving the first step he had taken toward trust. "You have traveled far," she said gently, "and yet here you are. Perhaps it is not the land that brought you to me, but the need to be seen." Her words struck him with a surprising force. No one had ever said something like that to him before. Most people had either feared him, hated him, or ignored him, but she saw him. The man he had become, not the man he had been. He wanted to speak, to explain why he was here, why he had walked alone through deserts and valleys, but the words felt meaningless. Instead, he lowered himself to the ground near the fire, careful not to seem threatening. The woman did not move away. She continued her work, preparing a small bundle of food and placing it near the fire to warm. She did not demand explanations. She did not ask for apologies. She simply existed beside him, showing that kindness could be given freely without conditions. As the morning turned to noon, the gunslinger slowly began to recover some strength. He ate small pieces of dried meat and bread, feeling the food nourish more than just his body. Each bite reminded him that survival was possible, that life could continue even after loss and mistakes. The woman watched him quietly, her presence calm and reassuring. She spoke only when necessary, asking simple questions about his travels, his injuries, and the land he had crossed. Her questions were gentle, not probing, and for the first time in a long while, he felt that he could answer honestly without fear of judgment. Over the next few hours, they sat together near the fire, sharing silence and occasional words. The woman told him about the land, about the plants and their uses, about the importance of balance and respect. She spoke of her people, their traditions, and the ways they cared for each other and the earth. The gunslinger listened, fascinated by her knowledge and the quiet strength in her voice. He realized that this world was very different from the one he had known, A world where life was measured not by fear or power, but by care, patience, and understanding. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, he noticed something changing within himself. The trembling in his hands had eased slightly. The tightness in his chest had loosened, if only a little. He felt a sense of safety he had not known in years. For the first time, he considered the possibility that he could belong somewhere, that he could find peace even after all the harm he had caused. The woman prepared a small sleeping area for him near the fire. She placed a soft blanket on the ground, leaving space for him to rest. He hesitated, unsure if he deserved such care, but she simply nodded and smiled, as if saying that no one was beyond help, and no one was unworthy of compassion. The gunslinger settled onto the blanket, feeling the weight of exhaustion finally press him down. For the first time in many nights, he allowed himself to close his eyes fully, to breathe without the constant tension of survival. Night fell completely and the stars emerged, scattered across the dark sky like tiny lanterns. The woman continued her work, tending to the fire and ensuring that the camp was safe. Occasionally, she glanced at the gunslinger, noting his slow, uneven breathing and the way his body finally seemed to relax. She knew that he was still carrying the burdens of his past, but she also understood that healing often began in small moments, with small gestures of trust and kindness. The gunslinger dreamed that night, though his dreams were restless. He saw faces he had harmed, places he had destroyed, and moments of failure he could not forget. But there were also flashes of something new, faces of people who had shown him kindness, the warmth of a fire on a cold night, the soft voice of the woman speaking to him without judgment. When he woke in the morning, he felt a strange mixture of guilt and hope. He was still haunted by the past, but the possibility of a future began to take root. Over the next several days, the gunslinger remained in the camp. The woman guided him gently, showing him how to tend the fire, gather water, and prepare simple meals. She spoke of the land of patience, of understanding the rhythm of life. He learned to observe, to listen, and to respect the world around him. Each day, he felt a small piece of his fear and guilt lift, replaced by something fragile but powerful: trust. He also began to share fragments of his story, though never all at once. He spoke of the towns he had visited, the people he had lost, and the mistakes that had driven him into the wilderness. The woman listened without interruption, without judgment. She asked questions that encouraged reflection, but never demanded answers. Through this process, he began to see himself more clearly, to understand that his past did not define him completely, that there was still room for growth and change. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the camp, he sat near the river and watched the water flow. The woman approached him quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "The river moves forward," she said softly. "It does not dwell on where it has been. It carries what it must, but it continues. So can you." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that, like the river, he had been carrying too much guilt, fear, shame, but that he could also move forward, slowly and carefully, toward something better. The gunslinger looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you help me?" he asked. "Why do you care?" She smiled gently, her eyes warm and steady. "Because everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves a chance. Even those who have fallen, even those who have made mistakes. You are not alone." For the first time in years, he felt a spark of something he had thought lost forever: hope. He did not yet know if he could fully trust himself, but he began to believe that he could try. The woman had not judged him, had not demanded repentance or confession, had only offered kindness and understanding. That simple act, so small in the world but so monumental to him, began to change the way he saw himself. The days passed, and the gunslinger grew stronger. He could walk longer distances without collapsing. His hands no longer shook as violently, and his mind was clearer. Yet the emotional weight remained. The woman knew he was still struggling, still haunted by the questions he had avoided for so long. She did not rush him. She knew that healing was a journey, not a moment, and that patience was as important as any medicine or care. By the end of the week, the gunslinger could speak more freely. He told small stories of his past, not proud stories, but honest ones. He shared memories of mistakes, losses, and regrets. And through it all, the woman listened, never flinching, never offering condemnation. She simply provided space, understanding, and guidance. And in that space, the gunslinger began to find something he had not felt in a long time: acceptance, both of himself and the possibility of being accepted by others. The days grew longer, and the gunslinger began to settle into the rhythm of the camp. The early fear and trembling that had accompanied him when he first arrived had softened. He could walk without collapsing, eat without trembling hands, and speak without constant hesitation. Yet inside, a storm of thoughts and memories still churned. Every quiet moment by the fire or along the river brought back faces he had hurt, towns he had abandoned, and choices he wished he could undo. It was exhausting, yet necessary, for the weight of his past could not simply vanish. The Lakota woman noticed his quiet struggles. She did not push him, but she understood the need to speak and to share what burdened the heart. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky with soft pinks and purples, she invited him to sit by the fire. The flames flickered and danced, casting shadows across their faces. The air smelled of sage and smoke, warm and earthy. The gunslinger hesitated for a moment, then sank onto the soft ground near her. He had learned in these past days that she offered safety, not judgment, and that every word spoken here could be a small step toward healing. "You have been carrying much," she said quietly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Some burdens are yours to carry, but some are meant to be shared." The gunslinger's voice caught when he tried to answer. He did not know how to start. How could he explain years of wandering, of hurting others, of failing himself? How could he speak of the shame that clung to him like a second skin? He could only nod slightly, letting her words settle in the silence between them. Slowly, he began to speak. At first, the words were short, fragments of memory and pain. I thought I was strong," he said, his voice low. "I thought I could handle anything, but every choice I made, it only left me empty." He paused, swallowing hard, his hands gripping his knees. "I hurt people, people I should have protected, people who trusted me. I don't know if I deserve to keep living." His voice trembled as he spoke, each word weighed down by years of guilt. The woman did not interrupt. She simply nodded, listening with patience that seemed endless. When he finished the first wave of words, she spoke softly, carefully. "Everyone makes mistakes," she said. "Everyone carries pain. The world does not demand perfection. It demands presence, effort, and the courage to face what has been done. You have faced much, and that is a beginning." Her words were not a cure, not an erasure of the past, but they were a spark, a small light in the darkness of his own self-doubt. The gunslinger leaned back, staring at the fire. Its flames rose and fell, unpredictable and alive, yet somehow comforting. I thought I could outrun it," he whispered. "I ran from towns, from people, from myself. I believed I could hide, that if I kept moving I wouldn't have to feel the weight of everything I've done. But it's with me, always, even now." He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "I don't know how to make it right." "You do not have to undo what has been done," the woman said. "The past cannot be changed, but the present can be shaped and the future can be guided. Your actions now, your choices in these moments, they matter more than any regret you carry." She reached out, placing a gentle hand near his, not touching him yet, only showing that a bridge existed between his isolation and connection. To be human is to struggle, to fail, and to try again. That is the path we all walk in our own ways. The gunslinger remained silent, but her words sank deeper than he realized. He had spent so many years believing that his life was beyond repair, that every action he had taken had disqualified him from mercy or understanding. And yet, here was someone who did not demand a confession, a payment, or an apology. She only offered him the possibility that he was still human, still capable of change, still worthy of care. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel something other than fear and guilt. A quiet hope began to grow, fragile but persistent. He had forgotten what it was like to feel safe, to feel seen without suspicion, to imagine a life not defined by past failures. He did not yet understand how to carry it, how to accept it, but the seed had been planted. As the evening continued, the woman began to share parts of her own story. She spoke of her childhood, of the lessons passed down by elders, and the ways her people learned to live in harmony with the land and each other. She spoke of loss, too, the friends she had seen leave the world, the family she had mourned. But she shared it not to burden him, but to show that suffering was a shared human experience. Listening to her, the gunslinger felt the first flicker of connection, a sense that he was not alone in carrying his pain. "The land teaches us patience," she said softly, "and the people teach us compassion. Life is not about being free from mistakes. It is about learning, forgiving, and moving forward. Even when it seems impossible, we are always capable of taking the next step." She looked at him then, eyes calm, unwavering, as if she could see through the layers of fear and shame he had built around himself. "Do you understand what I mean?" He nodded slowly, though words did not come easily. Understanding was not immediate, but the idea planted a thought in his mind. Maybe he could move forward. Maybe he did not have to let every past mistake define him. The path would not be easy. He would stumble. He would doubt himself. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way to live without letting fear and guilt control every step. Night deepened, and the fire crackled between them. Shadows danced across their faces, reflecting the complexity of their thoughts and the quiet power of shared silence. The gunslinger began to speak again, this time about moments he had tried to forget. He told stories of towns he had left behind, of friends lost to his own recklessness, of enemies he had fought without mercy. Each word carried the weight of remorse, but also the weight of honesty, the first honesty he had allowed himself in years. The woman listened patiently, offering gentle encouragement, asking questions that guided reflection rather than judgment. She asked how he felt in those moments, what he had learned, and how he had survived despite the mistakes. Slowly, the gunslinger began to see his own resilience. He had survived, after all. He had faced himself and his actions, and now, with someone to listen, he could begin to untangle the tangled threads of guilt and fear. Hours passed as they spoke, the night stretching long and quiet around the camp. The sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the distant calls of animals, the whisper of the river nearby, formed a gentle backdrop to their conversation. In that quiet, the gunslinger realized something profound. He was being heard, truly heard, without interruption, without judgment, without the constant need to defend himself. It was a sensation he had long forgotten, a gift more powerful than any weapon he had ever held. When he finally fell silent, the woman spoke one last time before he slept. "Healing does not happen in a single night," she said. "It happens in moments like this, in small steps, in trust given and received. You are beginning, and that is enough." Her words were soft, but they resonated deeply within him. He had spent so long believing he was beyond saving, that he had no worth, that the world would never forgive him. And yet here was proof to the contrary, proof that he could be seen, understood, and guided toward something better. As he lay down on the blanket she had prepared, the firelight warming his face, he felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief. Exhaustion from the weight of memories and truth, relief from the comfort of being seen and not judged. For the first time in many nights, he allowed himself to rest fully, without fear that danger or rejection would find him in the darkness. He dreamed again that night, but the dreams were gentler. Faces of kindness replaced faces of anger. Fires warmed instead of burning. Words offered understanding instead of judgment. And when he woke in the early light, he carried with him the first glimmer of hope he had felt in years. The days continued in this rhythm. Quiet work in the camp, shared meals and conversations by the fire. Each day brought small steps forward, small victories over fear and guilt. The gunslinger learned not only practical skills, how to tend a fire, gather water, and respect the land, but also lessons of patience, reflection, and the power of listening. The woman guided him with a calm hand, always encouraging, never demanding. She knew that true change came slowly, and that the heart needed time to heal as much as the body did. By the end of the third week, the gunslinger could feel himself changing in subtle ways. His hands no longer shook as much. His eyes, once haunted and hollow, carried a quiet steadiness. His thoughts, once consumed by regret and fear, now allowed glimpses of possibility, of life beyond survival and punishment. He did not yet know who he would become, but for the first time in a long time, he believed that the path ahead could be walked with intention, not just desperation. The days had grown longer, the sun rising higher and sinking lower, painting the sky with warm golds and soft pinks. The gunslinger moved with a quiet rhythm now, his body stronger, his mind clearer, though the weight of his past still lingered. He had learned much from the Lakota woman: patience, observation, respect for the land, and most importantly, the courage to look within himself. And yet, despite the small victories, a question haunted him, growing louder with each passing day. One question that he had tried to avoid, to bury under movement and survival, but that now demanded an answer. Am I worth saving? It happened one evening, as the sky turned deep orange and the first stars began to appear. He sat near the fire, staring into the flames. The Lakota woman had been teaching him how to care for the fire, to use it wisely, and to respect the balance it brought to life. But tonight he was not listening. His mind was elsewhere, turning over every mistake, every life he had hurt, every wrong path he had taken. He had shared much of his story, but this question, the one that cut deeper than any confession, remained unspoken, lodged in his heart like a stone. The woman noticed his silence, the way his shoulders slumped and his gaze lingered on nothing. She did not interrupt him immediately. Instead, she allowed the quiet to stretch between them, understanding that some thoughts needed to be felt fully before they could be spoken. Finally, he took a deep breath, his voice breaking the stillness. He began, then paused, swallowing hard. I don't know if am I worth saving? The words came out in a rush, trembling, unsure, filled with fear he had carried for years. The woman looked at him calmly, her eyes steady and warm. She did not react with shock, anger, or judgment. She simply nodded, inviting him to speak further, to let the words flow. The gunslinger felt his heart race. For so long, he had believed that the world had no place for him, that he was beyond redemption, that he had ruined any chance of peace. To ask this question aloud felt like exposing the deepest part of his soul, the part he had kept hidden even from himself. I've done things, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Things I cannot undo. I've hurt people. I've taken lives. I've run from every town, every person, every responsibility. And now I don't know if I can, if anyone could ever forgive me or even see me as worth helping. His hands shook as he spoke, trembling slightly over his knees. He wanted to disappear into the night, to vanish and never face the truth. But he also wanted an answer, even if it terrified him. The woman moved closer, her presence gentle and calm, yet filled with quiet authority. She did not offer a quick answer, nor did she try to minimize his pain. Instead, she spoke slowly, choosing each word carefully. You are asking the right question, she said. Not because the world must answer, but because you must ask yourself. The worth of a person is not measured only by their past, but by their willingness to face it, to learn from it, and to continue despite it. Her words struck him deeply. For so long, he had defined himself only by the mistakes he had made, the lives he had harmed, the fear he had inspired. He had believed that his past was a chain that could never be broken, that no act of kindness or courage could ever erase the darkness he carried. And yet, here was someone telling him that the past did not have to be the end of the story, that worth was not erased by failure. "I don't know if I can," he whispered. "I don't know if I deserve to." His voice trembled, cracking with the weight of guilt and fear. He had asked for answers before, from strangers, from townspeople, from himself, but none had ever given him hope. Most had met him with fear, anger, or silence. None had seen the man beneath the scars and regrets. The woman shook her head gently. "Deserving is not the measure," she said. "Deserving asks for perfection. Deserving asks for a life without mistakes. But life does not work that way. Life asks only for honesty, for effort, for the courage to walk the path in front of you. You are here. You have faced your fear, spoken your truth, and allowed yourself to be seen. That is enough to begin. That is enough to be saved." The gunslinger looked at her, his eyes wide, searching for doubt, for a hidden meaning, for any reason to dismiss her words. But there was none. Only calm, steady understanding. For the first time in years, he felt that someone truly saw him. Not the gunslinger who had been feared, not the man defined by mistakes, but the human who had survived, who had endured, who had taken the first steps toward healing. "I've carried so much," he said, his voice breaking. "So many faces, so many lives, I can still see them. I can still hear them. I don't know if I can ever make it right." He pressed his hands to his face, the trembling growing as the weight of years threatened to crush him. Am I still human?" The woman placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, not forceful but grounding. "You are human because you feel," she said softly. "You are human because you care. You are human because you seek truth, even when it is painful. You are human because you are willing to ask the hardest questions and to listen to the answers, even when they scare you. That is what it means to be alive, to be worthy, to be seen." Tears began to flow from the gunslinger's eyes, hot and bitter, but also cleansing. He had spent years hiding from this truth, believing himself unworthy, believing that no act of courage, no act of kindness could redeem him. And now here, in the quiet of the evening, with the firelight dancing across the Lakota woman's face, he realized that perhaps redemption was not about erasing the past. It was about acknowledging it, facing it, and choosing to continue. He sank to his knees beside her, hands gripping the blanket beneath him. "I don't know how to live like that," he whispered. "I don't know how to be worth saving." His voice was filled with desperation, the tremor in his body revealing the depth of fear he had carried for years. The woman knelt beside him, placing both her hands gently on his. Her eyes met his, steady, warm, and unyielding. "You do not need to know yet," she said. "The question is not answered all at once. It is answered step by step, day by day, choice by choice. Worth is not a single act. It is the accumulation of courage, honesty, and care. You are beginning. That is enough." The gunslinger closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her hands, the steadiness of her presence, and the truth of her words. For so long, he had believed that he was beyond saving, that he was unworthy, that the world had no place for him. And now, for the first time, he felt the faint stirrings of hope. Not certainty, not complete peace, but hope, a fragile light that he could hold on to, step by step, moment by moment. The night stretched on, the fire crackling softly, the stars shining above, and the gunslinger remained beside the woman, letting the question settle, letting the words sink into his heart. He did not need an immediate answer. He only needed to feel that he could ask the question and be met with understanding, and that was enough to begin the slow journey of healing. When he finally lay down to sleep, the trembling in his hands had lessened, the tightness in his chest eased. He dreamt that night not of fear or violence, but of the faces of those he had lost, smiling at him with forgiveness he had never thought possible. He dreamed of rivers flowing freely, of fires warming the cold, and of a path that stretched forward, not backward, toward a life he could still shape. By morning, he felt a quiet determination he had never known. The question still lingered, as questions do, but it no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it was a guide, a reminder that life, even after mistakes, offered moments of grace, chances to heal, and paths to meaning. The woman watched him quietly, sensing the subtle shift in his spirit. She knew the hardest step had been taken, not by moving through the wilderness, not by surviving the past, but by asking the question he had feared most and opening himself to the possibility that he was still human, still worthy, still capable of being saved. The morning air was crisp and clear, carrying the soft scents of the earth, the river, and the small fires that had been tended throughout the night. The gunslinger woke slowly, feeling the weight of the night's sleep settle in his body. For the first time in years, he felt something he had thought lost forever, a sense of quiet hope. The shadows of his past were still there, of course, but they no longer consumed him. He had learned, through patience, guidance, and the unwavering presence of the Lakota woman, that even the most broken heart could begin to heal. He rose carefully, stretching stiff muscles and inhaling the fresh air. The sun was rising, casting golden light over the camp and the surrounding landscape. Birds sang softly from the trees, and the river flowed steadily, a gentle reminder that life continued, no matter the mistakes, no matter the pain. He felt the fire of the previous night still glowing in the ashes, a symbol of the warmth and guidance he had received. The Lakota woman was already awake, tending to the fire and gathering water from the river. She moved with calm precision, each action purposeful, yet gentle. She noticed him watching quietly, and she smiled, a simple gesture that carried strength, understanding, and reassurance. The gunslinger approached her, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. He knew it was time to move forward, to take the lessons he had learned and face the world beyond the camp. "You are ready," she said quietly, almost as if reading his thoughts. "You carry your past, but it no longer controls you. The path is yours now. Walk it with care, with courage, and with the knowledge that you are still human." Her words were gentle, but they carried a weight that the gunslinger felt deep in his chest. For so long, he had doubted himself, believing that he was beyond hope, beyond redemption. Now he felt the possibility of something different, a life that he could shape with his own choices. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. "I don't know if I can be better or if the world will ever forgive me. But I want to try. I want to walk forward, not just run from everything I've done." His voice was steady now, though still tinged with vulnerability. It was the first time in years that he had spoken so openly about the future without fear completely overtaking him. The woman handed him a small bundle of food and water for the journey. "Take this," she said. "It is not just for your body but for your spirit. Remember that the steps you take today matter, even if the world does not notice. Begin with one step, then the next, and continue. That is how healing and life grow." He took the bundle with both hands, feeling the care she had put into it, the trust she had given him without condition. It was a reminder that kindness could exist, even for someone who had believed himself unworthy. He packed his belongings slowly, each movement deliberate. The coat he had worn for so long felt heavier now, not because of dust or wear, but because it carried memories. Memories of fear, of mistakes, of the countless nights spent running and hiding. Yet for the first time, he felt that he could carry them without being crushed. He could acknowledge the past without letting it define him. He could walk forward, even with the weight of regret, and still make choices that mattered. Before leaving the camp, he turned to the woman one last time. "Thank you," he said simply. I don't know if I can ever repay you, but I will try to live in a way that honors what you have shown me." His voice trembled slightly, but it was filled with sincerity. He had spent so long believing he was beyond help, beyond care, and yet here he was, ready to step into a future that he could shape himself. The woman nodded, her expression calm but filled with quiet pride. "You need not repay me," she said. "The gift of life, of understanding, is not a debt. It is a choice. You have chosen to see yourself as human again, and that is the most important step. Walk forward with honesty and courage, and you will find your path." Her words echoed in his mind, a mantra for the journey that lay ahead. As he stepped out of the camp, the sun fully rising above the horizon, he felt the first real freedom he had experienced in years. The land stretched before him, open and vast, full of possibilities. He did not know what challenges awaited him, what obstacles he would face, or what mistakes he might still make. But he also knew that he could face them differently now, with awareness, with care, and with the understanding that he could choose to act with integrity. The first few steps were tentative. He felt the familiar tremor in his hands, the memory of fear tugging at him, whispering that he was not worthy, that he would fail again. But he remembered the woman's words, one step then the next. He focused on each footfall, feeling the ground beneath him, the warmth of the morning sun, the breeze on his face. With each step, the weight of despair lifted slightly, replaced by a quiet determination. As he walked through the open plains, he reflected on all he had learned. He remembered the patience required to tend a fire, the careful observation of the land, the importance of listening more than speaking, and the courage it took to face oneself. Each lesson was like a small tool in his hands, ready to help him navigate the world beyond the camp. For the first time, he felt that he could apply these lessons, not just survive, but live with intention. Along the way, he encountered signs of life that reminded him of the beauty and fragility of the world. Birds flew overhead, their songs clear and sweet. Deer moved cautiously through the tall grass, alert but unharmed. Rivers sparkled in the sunlight, reflecting the sky and the trees along their banks. Each sight and sound reinforced the sense that life continued, that there was still hope, and that he could play a part in it without being controlled by his past. He thought about the people he had harmed, the lives he had touched with fear or violence. Guilt still lingered, but he now understood that it did not have to define him. He could honor those memories by choosing differently in the present, by acting with kindness and care, and by refusing to let fear dictate his actions. The past was a teacher, not a prison. And with that thought, he felt a sense of liberation that he had never known before. The journey was not easy. The terrain was rough, the sun harsh, and the nights cold. But each challenge reminded him of the strength he had found within himself, of the resilience he had discovered in the presence of the Lakota woman, and of the importance of every step he took. He walked with intention, mindful of the present moment, aware that the path forward was shaped by both effort and choice. As the days passed, he encountered other travelers, some kind, some wary. He approached each with caution, remembering the lessons of respect and patience. He listened more than he spoke, offered help when he could, and avoided actions that would bring harm. Slowly, he began to build a new reputation, not as a feared gunslinger, but as a man who had faced his past and sought to live differently. People noticed the change, even if they did not know the full story. His actions, guided by honesty and care, spoke louder than words ever could. One evening, as he rested by a quiet river, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the lonely desert paths, the nights of trembling and fear, to the guidance of the Lakota woman and the lessons he had learned, he had changed. Not completely, for the past still lingered, but profoundly enough to see a future filled with possibility. He understood now that being saved was not a single moment, but a series of choices, small and large, made with courage and honesty. He thought of the woman who had guided him, the patience and understanding she had offered, and the quiet strength that had shown him the way. He realized that she had not saved him. He had saved himself by allowing himself to be seen, by asking the hardest question, and by choosing to walk forward. Her role had been to provide guidance, but the courage to change had come from within him. The sun set that evening, casting a golden glow across the land. The gunslinger stood, looking at the horizon, feeling the warmth of the fading light on his face. He felt a sense of peace that he had never known, a quiet certainty that, while the journey ahead would not be easy, he was ready to face it. He was not a perfect man, nor a hero, nor someone without flaws, but he was human, and that was enough. With a deep breath, he began walking again, each step deliberate, each choice mindful. He carried his past with him, but it no longer controlled him. He walked forward with hope, with courage, and with the understanding that worth was not given, nor earned, nor taken. It was discovered within, through the willingness to face oneself and the world with honesty and care. The journey stretched ahead, long and uncertain, but for the first time the gunslinger did not fear it. He had learned that life, no matter how difficult, could be navigated with intention and compassion. And as he walked, he carried the quiet knowledge that he had been seen, understood, and guided, and that now he could step into the world not as a shadow of his past, but as a man choosing to live fully with heart and courage, one step at a time.